Hello, my name. Hello, my name is Matthew Bragulla, and this is my final presentation for J498. The title of our class is Latinx Diversity in the Newsroom, and I basically want to talk about what I've learned in this class. So let's go. So just want to start off by saying that if I've learned anything from this class, and I've learned a lot, is that Latinx people are easily some of the most overlooked communities and one of the most overlooked when it comes to journalism, especially. They are underappreciated and underutilized. The truth is that the Latinx community makes up a very considerable portion of our population. Look at Los Angeles. We have one of the biggest Latinx communities in the world. So it's only fair that our newsrooms reflect that. Unfortunately, right now, they do not. And there are also a lot of stories that can be told more accurately with the knowledge and experiences that Latinx journalists hold. Another thing that I've learned is that despite all the uh, problems that I've mentioned above, Latinx journalists are still willing to work hard and persevere even through this uphill battle, which includes not being represented, not being hired, and even if they're hired, like, the pay isn't fair. So I want to talk about, go through a little history about Latinx journalists, Latinx, and just the Latinx community. The Latinx community has had a long history of discrimination in America, and it especially applies to Latinx journalists. One of the most famous or infamous examples of this is the case of Ruben Salazar. Ruben Salazar was a journalist in the 1960s and 70s who really broke the mold for Chicano journalism. He was one of the first Chicano journalists to have his own segment in LA Times. He also became the news director of a Spanish TV news station, KMX. Uh, he reported on Chicano issues in Los Angeles, which included reporting police brutality towards the Chicano community. And this angered the LAPD. And near the end of his life, Ruben Salazar thought he was being followed by the cops. Um, I say this to mention that uh, on August 29th, 1970, the National Chicano Moratorium March was happening. This was a march against the Vietnam War. There was a lot of marches against the Vietnam War, but this was a march specifically by the Chicano community in Los Angeles because um, at the time, Latinos made up 10% of America's population, but the Mexican Americans were made up 20% of the deaths in Vietnam, according to the Daily Chela. So the community was not happy with, their men not coming home. So that's why they're protesting. Ruben Salazar was covering it. In the middle of the march, he went into a bar and there were riot police. They were firing tear gas, and one of them came into the bar and fired a tear gas canister, and it hit Ruben Salazar in the head, and he died. The LAPD claimed it was an accident. They still claim it was an accident, but many believe that it was their this was an act of retaliation against Salazar's, exposure of the LAPD's injustices against the Chicano community in Los Angeles. Now it has gotten better for Chicano journalists, but it's still not great. It's not what it could be. There's still a noticeable absence of Latinx journalists in newsrooms. For example, according to a UCLA newsroom study, the LA Times editorial board is only 11% Latinx. And of all the op-ed pieces that are produced by the LA Times, 95% of them do not include a Latinx voice. In my interview conducted with Jose Duran, he kind of continued to confirm this, pattern. He's a Mexican American KTLA producer and a professor here at CSUN. He said when he worked at a newsroom in Connecticut, he was one of three Latinos, and I he said he barely spoke to them. He also said he never had a Latino supervisor in, the newsroom. Um, to give a bit of more context, the Latino population in Connecticut is over 600,000, and that's in a total population of 3.6 million in Connecticut. So they make up around a little more than 17% of Connecticut's population. Interestingly enough, though, it seems that most newsrooms are really trying to push to be more diverse. They say that they are trying to, include as many people as possible. So why is there still a lack of Latino journalists? Well, in my Google outreach form, I contacted journalists from the Riverside Press Enterprise. The two writers that responded, said that Latinx journalists are integral to the newsroom, and they even offered suggestions on how to increase, the diversity. However, the first writer, Montserrat Solis, who's a CSUN grad, says that her newsroom and her editorial board don't reflect the diversity of the community. And then you have the other writer that responded, Kevin Smith, says that the newsroom and editorial board actually does. So there is kind of a split on how people, I guess, perceive the diversity of, the community and how it's actually, being reflected in the newsroom. Uh, Another reason why there might not be a lot of people in the newsroom is because, well, they're avoiding it. Um, there's several reasons why Latinx people might want to avoid newsrooms, or they aren't, well, they aren't in the same social class as white people and can't attend the prestigious universities that a lot of white journalists are um, hired from. And if they do get hired, there's a chance that it's a diversity pick. So it's just to say, to fit a quota, to say, yes, we have Latinx people. Look, we have one person in our room, which, I mean, at least, it's better than just totally brushing them away, but to just do it to fill a quota is, I guess, not the best, optics, not the best look on a newsroom, but it happens in many jobs, unfortunately. Despite all of this, despite all the unfair systems keeping Latinx journalists down, they continue to strive. As Professor Molina mentioned many times, the Latinx community has the importance of hard work drilled into them. Basically, people in the Latinx community um, end up understanding that their situation in America is unfair, and they have to work and struggle twice, 3 times, 10 times as hard as white counterparts. Jose Duran kind of suggested that he had to work harder, to make it, uh, because he didn't have the resources that his white counterparts had. When he was here at CSUN, he had to hold down another job, an internship. Even when he made it to his Connecticut newsroom, he had to hold another job just to strive. One of the other um, interviews that I thought was pretty insightful was Tony's interview with Professor Ruben Kiyoscian, who worked in Telemundo for about 40 years. He led them for a while, and he said he started out working low-paying internships. He was getting coffee for writers, but he continued to strive. He continued to basically make his mark. Um, he was writing, directing, producing. He asked questions. He, offered to, help in the newsroom. So how do we bring about change? You know, um, we want to say it's getting better, but it's, and it seems to be, but it could be a lot, better. So how do we make the change? It's the first step. We got to be loud. We got to get loud, and we got to get louder. We need to demand for more diversity in newsrooms. We need to demand that our newsrooms accurately reflect the makeup of the communities that we live in. We have to promote inclusion so we get more accurate storytelling. For example, a white guy might not be able to tell the best, tell the best story of a Hispanic community. One of the stories Jose Duran told me in his experience at KTLA um, was that the newsroom was reporting on the death of a very significant Hispanic musician, and he had to be the one to give them the context, like of how significant he was, because the rest of his newsroom did not know. And we need to be willing to investigate these kinds of stories. We need to actually go into the Hispanic communities. A lot of times they get overlooked. No more just going into the government buildings, the governor's office. The real stories happen in the community centers and the neighborhoods. This tells the true story of, our cities and our states and even our country. And in my opinion, these are the best ways to ensure that we can, get more diverse and accurate reporting. Thank you very much. I really hope you guys enjoyed this presentation. Um, here are my sources if you'd like to see that. And thank you.